systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke out here for our round 4 live stream for the Mexico Open. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your lineups tomorrow with a look at the weather, some of the stat averages out there from today, some strategy out there for the final round, as well as any of your questions down there in the live chat. We'll touch on a few other things like contest selection, also lineup construction out there towards the end. But anything you guys want filled in out there in between, just go ahead and let me know down there in that live chat. You got Alan down there. Welcome on in out there to the live. Appreciate the kind words, and we'll get after it out here for Sunday. Welcome on in, Kevin. And we also have Jonathan down there too. And yeah, the apartment flood, I appreciate you asking about it, is doing a lot better. In fact, they said that by tomorrow morning, everything is going to be dried up. So no more loud vacuuming, at least as of tomorrow morning. So I'm excited about that. I appreciate you checking up on me and whatnot. But let's talk about some golf over there for tomorrow. And when we take a look at the stat averages from today, you can see a little bit of a split between morning and afternoon. And if you guys follow my Twitter or X over there, GS LukeDFS, I did tweet out something about the weather this morning. So if you guys aren't already following over there on Twitter, make sure you do so, because I do tweet out a lot of stuff when it comes to Showdown. And what you saw today was a lot lower winds for the first 3 or so hours. And really the main area of where the scores went up was the last maybe like 2 hours of play, where it went from about like a 0.3 shot difference between morning and afternoon, which is usually due to the receptiveness of the greens. I think that's why the morning was playing a little bit easier, but it went from that 0.3 to a 0.6 shot difference because of that wind starting to kick up. So if we go over here to the observed weather from today, you're going to see that over here on Data Golf. In the morning, it was closer to 3 to 5 miles an hour. When it started to really crank towards the end of the day, it got to that 14 to 15 mile an hour range. Now, you can see down here on the Data Golf forecast, it's not supposed to be quite as severe out there for tomorrow, but even if it is just the receptiveness of the greens, that's the difference between the morning and the afternoon, and it's a little bit of wind out there towards the end of play, I would expect some sort of difference out there between the first and second half. Now, you already have the tee times out there for tomorrow. You'll see that they're going to be threesomes off of holes 1 and 10 again, which does limit the ability for an advantage. But today we had that same sort of scenario, and you'll see that it played to that same kind of advantage. So going into the weather now, you can see that in the morning it looks calm, just like the first 3 days. And then in the afternoon, right around 1, 2 p.m., like clockwork at this kind of event, it goes from 4 or 5 miles an hour to about 9 to 12 when it comes to your sustained. Now, today it was a little bit spicier than what you had even the first few days. It did get to that 13 to even 15 miles an hour sustained. But what's to say that this forecast doesn't change by tomorrow? In fact, if we go through a few other ones on here, some of them look even calmer than what you have over there in the ECM. Some look just as blustery as what you have there too. So this is the kind of thing that I'll be checking on tomorrow morning. If we wake up and it looks completely flat across all 4 models, then maybe I don't try and take some early starters for as much leverage. Now, the thing that we have to note about a Sunday Showdown slate is that we have the placement points in play as per usual, but you're going to have to get different as well. You're going to have some of those pieces of leverage. And if we do have that same kind of split between the morning and the afternoon like we got today, it's going to make it really easy to find that leverage, because if they're playing to a 0.6 easier scoring average, you know, it makes getting to maybe a few, 2, maybe 3 guys that are starting towards the first half of tee times a real easy way to get different. And then of course your other 3, maybe 4 spots in your lineup is where you're taking guys starting in that top 10, top 5 and trying to get the winner, some of those placement points towards the top end of the board. In an ideal scenario, we get that same kind of weather edge. That's how I like playing over there for Sunday Showdown. So that kind of touches over there on the strategy. I'm going to go ahead and close the door real quick. My cat opened it, decided to go out there and escape to the rest of the house, which I guess is okay, but it is a little bit loud. So I'm going to go ahead and move that real quick. We'll catch up on chat, and then we're going to go through some of these shots gain metrics here together as well. So just give me 1 second here. The cat's really smart, by the way. She knows how to open doors. She knows how to unlock certain doors. So we have to take precautions to make sure that she doesn't escape. Good to hear. Appreciate that, Jonathan. Was that Willie Z in the thumbnail? I'm not sure. I think it's Ben Campbell who's over there in second place, but I don't make the thumbnail, so I don't know for sure. What's going on, B. Hayes? Do I think Hastings is good chalk or bad chalk? He's super cheap. He's towards the top end of the board. I'd say a lot of times those amateurs, inexperienced guys, people immediately look to fade, but he's played pretty consistent golf over the first 3 rounds. So if you're looking for placement points, you absolutely need the salary. Like there's a time and place to getting to a Hastings. There's actually a few guys that are minus 10 or better down there in that 6K range that you could use for that same kind of purpose. But the other unknown out there with Hastings, sure, he's young, inexperienced. We haven't seen him all that much. They could just be a lot better than we realize. He's a college golfer. He's had a win over the last month over there on the college circuit. Could just be an absolute badass. So I think that he's in play for sure. I wouldn't call him bad chalk. What's going on, Brian? Said, hi, mate. Got your first win of the year for Showdown. Not a great prize pool, but a win is a win. Hit the nail on the head right there. A win is a win. Congratulations to that. Hit the like button, says Wayne. You heard the guy. Go out there and do so if you haven't already. Spill the beans on the big announcement. We won't tell anyone. I don't know exactly what it is. And look at that. Tambo's down there in chat. I have an inkling, but you're not getting a damn word from me, especially when we know the boss is down there in chat. So we're, yeah, there's zero chance that you're getting any sort of inkling on that. So let's talk through these shots gained metrics. Any sort of deep dives that you guys want, feel free to go ahead and let me know. But we're going to focus on the shots gained metric aspect now. So over here at approach in round 3 is usually where I like to start. And what I'll say about the shots gained metrics heading into tomorrow is I like to start with the round 3 stuff. And then I like to also take a look at the event as a whole and over rounds 1 through 3. So we're going to start over here with the round 3 stats, what we saw out there for today. Blades Brown, who, by the way, I took for a 3-ball bet today against Thurston Lawrence. I forget who the third guy he was playing against was. Went out there and absolutely smoked them. So this kid, he's not an amateur anymore. He is a young tour pro, though, an absolute stud. So gained over 3 strokes on approach. Could be a look over there for round 4 Showdown. Is at T22. Is going to have to go out there, hit the ball like he did today, but does have a little bit of short game regression that could be coming as well, because you can see he's losing nearly 2 strokes around the green. And though he was into the positive on the greens, it's not like he went out there and gained 3-4 strokes to the field. David Lipsky hit his irons well. Same thing with guys like a Patrick Rogers. Worth noting that P-Rod also lost over a stroke on the greens. Henrik Norlander, Hisatune, guys like Noah Goodwin, also Joe Highsmith. All guys that gained close to, if not over 2 shots gained on approach. So these sort of players are the kind of guys that I give a little bit of a boost to, especially when they're not mega chalk. And, you know, it's great to see guys like a Jaeger, a Brian Campbell, all going out there and gaining all those strokes on approach. But all the guys towards the top pretty much have gone out there and been lights out days 1 through 3. So, you know, it's nice to see, I guess, especially if you're looking for a conviction play, but where you can really use these shots gained metrics to your advantage are with some of the players a little bit further down the board. So a Henrik Norlander, for example, starting there at T29, you know, he's not going to win this thing. There's no chance in hell, right? Starting at -8, but he could conceivably, with a nuclear round, get into the top 10, maybe even crack like the top 7 if he goes out there and shoots something like -7, -8. And his shots gained profile looked pretty damn solid out there from tee to green, into the positive in all 3 categories there, and then lost a little bit over there with the putter. So these are the kind of players that I use the shots gained metrics for a little bit more. The guys up top, it's more of an ownership game to me, with players like a Jaeger, you know, a Campbell, also Pot Guider up there towards the top end of the board. I'm going to be playing game theory with a lot of those different players. You're going to have to take some of those guys, by the way, right? Just because I mentioned that they're chalk, they're going to be getting all that ownership, does not mean that you can completely ignore the top end of the board. Placement points matter, especially out there in those large field GPPs. And while there is some scoring around this golf course, you have to imagine that of those top 4 or 5 players, that at least 3 of them are probably shooting -4 or better. That's the way that it's looked to this event to this point. Hell, the guys that were towards the top today all went out there and pretty much had low rounds. Jaeger, right, at least -3, -4, even -5, -6 rounds up there for your top 3 players. It's going to be a lot of the same tomorrow. Now, does that mean that all of them are going to go out there and have low rounds? Absolutely not, right? Potgieter could succumb to some of the nerves tomorrow. A Jaeger, I'd say, is a little bit more experienced than guys like a Campbell or Aldrich up there at the top. But any of those guys could go out there and choke as well. So you're going to have some of those guys in your player pool. But I think where it's a little bit more interesting to do the deep dives here are we're going to win and lose the GPP. Because even if you hit on a Jaeger, a Campbell, a Potgieter towards the top, you're going to have 40% of the field, right? Sharing that kind of play. You hit on a Henrik Norlander or another one of these sleeper plays, and you could be looking at a guy that's sub 10% owned. So a few other players that kind of stand out would be a Hayden Springer there at T22. He's not going to be a super low owned play, but is starting far enough back where he's not going to be nearly as steamed as some of the other guys towards the top. A Thorbjorn Olesen, also a very respectable day out there in approach. I also like to take a look at the off the tee poppers as well, especially if they can go out there and do it on approach. Unfortunately, Aldrich lost all the strokes that he went out there and gained off the tee today. The guys like a Højgaard into the positive across both categories. He also lost strokes with the putting. So I would say that he's a player that would be due for a little bit of regression there. And Alejandro Tosti also into the positive across both ball striking categories, lost about a stroke over there in the greens. And then a Victor Perez, same thing. He wasn't as stout on approach, just slightly into the positive in that category, but positive on approach over a stroke gained there, and then lost nearly 4 strokes out there with the short game category. So this is where I'm looking for some of that regression on players. And if I'm looking for some of my conviction plays up top, that's where I like to take a look at the full event stats. So what we're going to do here is we're going to zoom out, take a look at rounds 1 through 3 in the top end of the leaderboard here. And if I'm looking for a conviction play, somebody to go out there and use despite 30-40% ownership, it's going to be the guys that are gaining a bunch on approach. And Brian Campbell is that guy. And I hate to say it because I know next to nothing about this guy. Hell, I hardly knew he existed out there before this week. But based on the stats out there between rounds 1 through 3, he's the best play towards the top end of the board. And I guess the other factor that makes him really easy for me to get on is that I have an Aldrich outright. I have like 45% Jaeger out there in the main slate lineups, and I've got multiple lineups up there in the top 25 of the $5 GBP. So to say that it would be a little bit of a self-hedge to go out there and play Brian Campbell would be an understatement, because if he goes out there and wins, goes out there and trounces the field, you're obviously going to have him for showdown. But if that happens, that also means that I'm probably not going to win that big $5 GBP. So for me, it is a little bit that self-hedge. I don't always go out there and do so, but it makes it a really seamless thing to go out there and want to do when he's gaining that nearly 6 strokes out there on approach. Now, he's also been a little bit short game heavy. You can see same thing with Aldrich up there at the top, gaining about 10 strokes between the around the green and the putting. Same thing with the Brian Campbell, a little bit less. It's closer to 8 strokes that you've seen there for Brian Campbell, but at least he's gaining a bunch of strokes over there on approach. So a little bit further down the board, it can help us find some of our other flag plants though. So for example, like an Aaron Rye gaining over 6 strokes on approach, that is pretty impressive stuff. It's been Griffin, Toasty also having really good iron weeks, but a little bit further down the board. So, trying to make it a little bit more sneaky, Patrick Rogers, look at these ball striking stats, just next level stuff, gaining over 3 strokes on approach, nearly 6 strokes over there with his irons. Going down a little bit further, you've got Hisatune here, gaining over 5.5 strokes with the iron play. These are all players starting towards the top end of the board that I'd be willing to use as conviction plays. And even a Hisatune, even a Joel Damon, for that matter, over here, gaining over 2 strokes on approach. All these guys are going to have some sort of ownership, but if you're going to play somebody, and all of them are probably at least 10, at least 15% owned, if not closer to 20-25% on some of your more expensive players. If you're going to use guys in half your lineups, like you'd have to get leverage on a 25% owned player, I want it to be the guys that are hitting the ball well. So that's kind of the difference between taking a look at the entire event and the shots gained metrics so far, and then what you can do over there for round number 3. Now, what I'd like to do for round number 3 as well, and I meant to do this before we look at the entire event, is take a look at some of the guys that lost and gained a whole bunch of strokes putting, because just like the approach play, where that's consistent out there from day to day, the opposite end of that spectrum would be your putting and your short game. Those categories are a lot more volatile than what you have with hitting the golf ball, and a lot of that comes down to luck. So guys like a Norman, a Pan, pretty much this entire bottom end of the board that's losing over 2 strokes putting, they're all players that you could see get a little bit more lucky tomorrow, right? Get some of that regression back to their means and putt a whole lot better. So for guys that kind of stand out to me would be like a Victor Perez, who lost nearly 3 strokes over there on the greens. CT Pan, Norman up there towards the top, always players that you might want to keep an eye on. Now, a lot of these guys, you can see almost all of them for that matter, are towards the bottom end of the board. So if you're looking for leverage plays, that's where you're really going to be living right here. But these sort of options, pretty much in every single case, like even CT Pan, that's up there towards the middle, the top end of pricing, you're looking at single digit ownership there, as opposed to 10 to 15% on a lot of the players around him. A Vince Norman, rather than being 7 to 10% owned, like he was for the last 2 rounds in Showdown, because of his real subpar performance, they're looking at sub 5% ownership on a player that's due for a whole lot of regression over there on the green. So these are ugly plays. There's a reason why they're down towards the bottom end of the board. But if you can find somebody that hit the ball well and lost all those strokes putting, that's where you could really find a low-owned sleeper play. And there's not a lot of players that really fit that. Like a Scott Piercy does, a Santiago de la Fuente is a player that gained ball striking and lost to the putter. Already mentioned the Victor Perez a little bit before, but even a Rosner who just lost a little bit on approach but gained off the tee. Even a Lawrence that gained off the tee but lost over there in approach. These are the kind of players that I'd use as a low-owned diamond in the rough. So, there's a purpose over here for the putting stats as well. Same thing around the green. A lot of that comes down to luck. So guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes around the green, so like a Beyonde, Phillips, also Svensson and Higgs up there towards the top, are players that you could see regress back to the means tomorrow. Now, the opposite's true as well. So if we go to the top end of the putting list, these are players that putted well above their baseline. So a Steven Jaeger, who, by the way, has had a pretty decent putting week, a pretty decent stretch of events when it comes to the flat stick. But up here towards the top, like a Joel Damon, I would be very surprised if he went out there and gained over 3 strokes with the putter again. Chan Kim even is a little bit of a sketchy putter. Hastings, like he's probably not going to go out there and gain 3 strokes with the putter again, but at least he was solid with the tee to green as well. So that's what, when somebody asked about him a little bit earlier, that's why I said he was still a pretty decent play, but you shouldn't be counting on any of these sort of players to go out there and repeat that kind of performance. If there's somebody like a Damon, a Jaeger that still went out there and were solid with their iron play, like they're usable over there for your Sunday showdown. It's just that they're going to really have to step it up out there with their tee to green. You'd have to think that like a Jaeger, guys like a Chan Kim, Hastings, they're not going to be close to 3 shots gained putting. So they're going to have to gain 2 or 3 strokes out there with their irons to make up for that kind of difference. So that's what I like to look at over there with the shots gained metrics. I'll see if there's any deep dives that we need to do. If not, by the way, make sure to check out the Stone over here on the SHIPIT Nation site, especially for round 4 showdown. They have a lot of stuff on there that I find extremely valuable. The round 4 historical is the absolute nuts when it comes to playing Sunday showdown. Gives you guys an idea of not only how they play on Sundays, but also how the pressure affects some of those players. You've got the approach series, true approach delta, which I'm always trying to find players with the highest true approach delta, and same thing over there on the putting series side. But let me see if there's any deep dives need to do. And if not, we're going to go through contest selection. And then afterwards, we're also going to go through a little bit of lineup construction stuff. So where we leave off, they want you to give a hint, Tambo, but I don't think you're going to, right? Pot misses to the right and a tough finish makes you worry about him tomorrow. I could see that. And Jaeger Bombs gets it done. Jaeger Bombs is the play that I'd say if you're going to take a guy up there in the top 3, like he's the one that makes the most sense to me. And that doesn't mean it's going to work out that way tomorrow. I kind of hope it does because I have a lot of exposure out there in DFS, but he's the one with experience. He's the one who's actually won on the PGA Tour before, and he has good course history around this kind of golf course. Those other 2, it's their first time playing here. They have no wins. They have no experience other than Potgetter, I guess. He does have some experience over there playing in contention. But Jaeger is the one that's going to have the step up. So we'll have to see how it works out. Is Tiger joining the SHIPIT Nation crew? That'd be a heck of an ad over there for that announcement, huh? What's going on, Ross? Campbell was steady as he played his way out of the fairway, 80 to 90 yards behind his playing partners. That's for damn sure. That was pretty much the case the entire day, and he hit absolute nutted shot after nutted shot. So that was pretty awesome. What's going on, Keys? He said, after watching my round 2 and 3 stream last week and learning how to use the shots gained data, you turned $45 into $600 today. So those are the kind of stories that you like to hear down in chat. Good stuff. Finishing second in the 3 contests and first in 1. That's exactly what I like to hear down there in chat. So people that are improving their process, right, learning out here from these live streams, that's what it's all about. Yeah, I see that the chat is cheering him on. That's good stuff down there. What's going on, Jose? Can I deep dive Andrew Putnam? It feels like he had a lot of opportunities that didn't capitalize. I noticed that as well. And it wasn't because I was actually tracking Putnam. It's because I was tracking a few players in his group. In terms of the stats, gained on approach. So you were on to something there. Did gain with the putter. So I'm not sure the putter was as cold as maybe what you expected. But this kind of shots gained profile is decent enough where in a large field GPP, I might consider getting to an Andrew Putnam. Now, they're at T35. I'm probably not using that guy in like a single entry, that sort of thing. Like the shots gained metrics just aren't good enough to go like, oh, wow, like that's a guy I need to get to. But if you're in a 150 max pool and you need to have 30 guys in your player pool, like that's a low-owned player that you could get to for sure because he at least played decently enough to keep himself in it. And he's not going to top 10 starting at T35, but he gives you a really low round. He might get close to a top 15 or something like that, which if you shoot a low enough round, you shoot like -5, -6, could get it done over there in a GPP. Small beans contest because you're a poor 15 entry being your max. Yeah, you got to start somewhere, right? And hey, I was there someday too. When I was in college, just entering it was FanDuel actually that I started on for DFS, which I only do DraftKings now. So I find that a little bit ironic. I was entering $1 to $3 contest in between classes up there at Pitt. So I've been there myself. Hey, the fact that you're starting to see some results is beautiful, and keep leaning into that and keep trying to learn going forward. So we went through the shots gained metrics. I'll go back to this if we need to, if anyone wants any deep dives. But in terms of our contest selection out there for tomorrow, it's pretty sweet out here for Sunday. I was not expecting them to really step up their contest, but they did. The big $25 GBP is going to be $250K in terms of prizes. Still super top heavy. So still a fifth out there to first place, which is sub-ideal, but a little bit of a bigger prize pool out there for the last round. The big 555 is what, a 12 entry max over here for Sunday. Also pretty top heavy, but a decent payout there, especially 50K to first is pretty sweet out there for any kind of contest, especially with sub 500 entries. This big $250 contest, yeah, this is the 4 max that they've had posted. Again, another top-heavy payout structure, but at least getting larger size contests out there for tomorrow. My favorites are going to be contests like this, like the single entry is a 6th to first place. So once again, a little top-heavy out here with these GPPs. So I might have to go to some of the secondaries when they get those posted. But you've got the big drive the green here as well, right? The $5 150 max. Also a 6th out there to first place. I've got to say, if you like big first place prizes, I guess these contests aren't all that terrible. But if you're somebody that likes the, 10% to first, maybe 15, 20% out there to first place kind of contests, I see like nothing here to work with. So let me see if they have that $10 GPP. I also don't see that posted. So I guess we can't really expect all that much because this is the Mexico Open, but it is something that I'll be keeping my eye out for. So maybe they'll end up posting it if there's enough interest, if there's enough people going out there and entering these contests. Maybe they'll post something like that $10 18 max. But as of right now, it's likely looking like 50 lineups or so over there in that $5 150 max for me. And then I might get suckered into entering this $100 single entry. My only apprehension there is that the payout structure is just a little bit more top heavy than I would like, but it's not the worst thing that I've ever seen, if we're being honest. So there's a chance that I definitely get an entry in there too. Let's go over to the lineup construction segment. So now we're going to talk about what we should be thinking about when building lineups, which for your Sunday showdown is a lot different than rounds 2 and 3. Rounds 2 and 3, you really go out there and you focus on getting differentiation. We're really just focused on making sure we're not duplicated and we have our leverage in our lineups. Sunday showdown, we've got to focus on placement points to some extent. So what I usually like to do is I start off my lineup with who I think is going to win this golf tournament. So for the sake of this, I'm going to take, Smalley is not who I meant to click there. It was a Steven Yeager there at $10,400. I also like to pair up another player that I think is going to finish top 3. So I'm going to throw in a Ben Campbell there because of the approach stats that we've seen. And then we're going to throw in one more guy to finish top 5. And this doesn't have to be somebody starting in the top 5. It could be somebody like, let's say, a Patrick Rogers, or even starting over here at -11. These guys that are T12, like an Akshay Bhatia there at $11,000. Now, if we went with Akshay, it's really going to force our salary. So maybe we don't go that expensive for this next player. In fact, like an $8,800 Højgaard would probably be about the best, most appropriate player that we could take in that kind of spot. But now we've got 3 players that we're counting on to finish top 5, right? Jaeger or Campbell, one of those 2 is going to be our winner. You got another top 3 finish and then another top 5, hopefully, over there with a Nikolai Højgaard. Our last 3 spots now are where we're going to have to get different to the field. And for the sake of this, we're going to assume it's like for the big $25, their big $5 GPP, where we're entering against 10 to maybe 15,000 other entries. And in those sort of contests, you can't be playing 4 or 5 guys towards the top. Like, you might get away with 4. Like, if you threw in somebody here that was like T22 or like T12 or something like that up towards the top, you could get away with that if you leave some salary on the table and if you make sure your last 2 players are big leverage spots. I'm talking like sub 7% at most over there on those 2 players. But really the better way to go about it is to take 3 slightly leveraged players down here towards the bottom end of the board. They don't have to be guys that are completely out of it, guys that have played completely shit to this point of the week. They can be guys like an Olesen, for example, who hit the ball well in approach today, is up there at T29. So if he has a solid round, could maybe get into that top 15. You just don't want to be sticking up there to all those T12 or better sort of players. Next man in, up here towards the top end of the 7K range, like a Vince Norman. I know he doesn't have that placement point potential, but he lost like 4 strokes on putting today. He also was solid with the approach the first few rounds. So maybe you look to him for a little bit of a bounce back. And then we can't build a whole lineup here together. It's against the terms of service over there on DraftKings. But your last man in, as long as you're not super chalky here. So probably if you avoid a Hisatune, you go to anyone else, you're going to be solid even in that big $5 or $25 GPP. The idea there is that you have some placement points up there towards the top, but your last 2-3 players out there in any given lineup need to be where you're getting that differentiation. And the larger field GPP that you're entering, right, the bigger the contest that you're going out there and playing in, the more differentiation that you need. So if you're in maybe $100 single entry, right, something that only has a couple hundred entries, maybe you don't have to worry about the ownership nearly as much as what you are in those big field GPPs, but it is still a part of your process. So make sure that in those kind of contests, you're not entering just a cash build out there for tomorrow. You know, a cash build looks the exact opposite of what we just talked about. All you're doing in cash is optimizing your projection, which for Sunday means playing the guys at the top end of the board. So I'm not a big player of cash over there for Sundays. I just think when you have all the people playing the same players, that it kind of defeats the purpose out there for any given DFS contest. So I stick out there to my large field GPPs where I need to have those 2-3 differentiation options. And just to kind of go back to it, right, that's where finding those approach poppers from round number 3 could be a really big aid, as well as some of the short game regression sort of players. So make sure to check that out over there, as well as your round 4 historical over there on the SHIPIT Nation Stone and the approach series out there for all of your analysis. Let me see if there's any last second questions. If not, we're going to hop on out of here. So if you haven't already smashed that like button, go ahead and do so. And also subscribe so we can get the channel closer to 10,000 subscribers, which is a big milestone. So let's work towards it. Let's pump those numbers up. Where we leave off, the $44 entry looks pretty good. I didn't catch that, so let's look at it, huh? So it's right here. It is a 16 entry. Okay, so that's strange. It's not something we always see, but it's a $44 right there. The payout structure is also kind of top heavy, like some of those other contests, but this is an easy one to go out there and max enter, right? I guess max entering this would cost you about like $700 or so. I'm not that great with mental math where I can do 44 times 16, but yeah, that seems like a reasonable max enter, right? 44 times 16 there. Yeah, that's, I don't know, a little top heavy, but if you're okay with that, you can enter it. Nice whiskey, Luke. Penderyn Selt, Welsh whiskey single malt. So yeah, I haven't had any Welsh whiskey before. I've heard great things about it. I mean, Scotch is made over that way as well. And as you know, I like my whiskey. Yeah, you know that for sure. And in fact, after we get off live stream here, Brian, I'll be pouring up a little bit of Four Roses double barrel over here. So I'm looking forward to that. That's all I've got, guys. Best of luck over there with all of your exposure over there for Sunday. Next week, we've got the Cognizant Classic, which a lot of you guys might not know over here on the SHIPIT Nation channel is about 5-10 minutes over here from my house. So I played over there at PGA National hundreds of times before. I go every single year. I can essentially walk out of my backyard and see the golf course. So we're going to have boots on the ground action next week. I'll be there early Tuesday, Wednesday, giving you guys some of the goods. So make sure to stop on my live stream on Wednesday. I'll be talking about some of those boots on the ground stuff. And for Showdown next week, you're going to have all the goods there as well. So I like to hang out the range quite a bit when we have these events that are near my house, especially because I can go home get lunch, kind of chill in AC, and then go back out there and watch guys do grinding on the range, that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to that. Should be an absolute blast out there. That's all I've got, guys. Looking forward to that as well. And let's have ourselves a Sunday, and let's ship a few contests out there as well.